The news of Sarah's rescue spread quickly through the small town, lighting up social media feeds and sparking conversations at grocery stores and coffee shops. Neighbors who had once only exchanged polite waves gathered outside the Thompsons' home, holding candles in a vigil to celebrate her safe return. For Mark and Emily, the overwhelming support from their community was both comforting and surreal. They had spent days fearing the worst, but now, with Sarah finally back home, they could begin the long process of healing. Sarah's first night home was quiet, almost too quiet. She sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, staring blankly at the flickering TV screen without really seeing it. Her body was exhausted, but her mind raced with memories she couldn't escape. The cold darkness of the bunker, the sound of Daniel's voice echoing in her ears, the constant fear that she might never see her family again. Emily curled up beside her, clutching her hand tightly as if afraid to let go. "I'm here, Mommy," she whispered over and over, as though trying to reassure herself as much as her mother. Mark hovered nearby, unsure of what to say or do. He wanted to ask Sarah questions about where she'd been, how she survived, but he held back, sensing she wasn't ready to talk about it yet. Instead, he focused on small gestures, making her favorite tea, adjusting the thermostat when she shivered, and sitting close enough to remind her she wasn't alone. The silence between them was heavy, but it was also filled with unspoken gratitude. For her survival, for their reunion, for the chance to start anew. Over the next few weeks, life slowly began to take on a semblance of normalcy. Sarah attended counseling sessions twice a week, working through the trauma with a therapist who specialized in cases like hers. At first, she struggled to open up, her voice trembling as she recounted the horrors she endured. But gradually, she found strength in sharing her story, not just for herself, but for Emily, who needed to understand why her mommy had been gone for so long. Emily, too, started seeing a child psychologist to help her process everything she'd witnessed. Though she was young, the events had left an indelible mark on her. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night, crying and saying, "Bad man is coming." Other times she clung to Sarah, refusing to leave her side even for a moment. But with patience and love, Sarah reassured her daughter that the bad man was gone forever. And this time, she meant it. Meanwhile, Daniel's trial dominated local headlines. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence against him, including the photos, maps, journal entries, and forensic findings from the cabin and bunker. His defense team argued that he acted out of misguided love, but the jury saw through the excuses. After deliberating for less than a day, they returned a guilty verdict, sentencing Daniel to life in prison without parole. The courtroom erupted in applause as Sarah, seated beside Mark and Emily, allowed herself a small smile. Justice had been served. As months passed, the scars began to fade, though they never fully disappeared. Sarah planted flowers in the backyard, filling the space with color and life, a symbol of renewal. Emily returned to school, her laughter growing louder and more frequent with each passing day. And Mark threw himself into work, channeling his energy into rebuilding the sense of security their family had lost. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah stood by the window watching Emily play in the yard. Mark joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We've made it," he said softly. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "We did." Though the nightmare would always linger in the corners of their minds, they chose to focus on the present, the warmth of their family, the promise of brighter days ahead, and the unshakable bond that no one could ever break. Together, they were stronger than anything the world could throw at them. The search for Sarah intensified as the hours ticked by, but Daniel's silence remained unbroken. No matter how hard Detective Harris pushed him, he refused to reveal her location, his face a mask of stubbornness and twisted resolve. "You don't understand," Daniel muttered during one interrogation session. "She's better off without you interfering. She needs time to see things my way." His words sent chills through the room, but they also reinforced the urgency of the situation. Every second counted. While Harris continued questioning Daniel, another team focused on expanding the search around the abandoned cabin. Officers scoured the woods, calling out Sarah's name and shining flashlights into every shadowy corner. Dogs trained in tracking human scent were brought in, their noses pressed close to the ground as they sniffed for any trace of her. The forest was vast and unforgiving, but no one dared slow down, not when Sarah's life hung in the balance. That's when one of the officers noticed something peculiar, a faint trail of disturbed leaves leading away from the cabin. It wasn't obvious at first glance, but upon closer inspection, it became clear that someone had recently walked this path. Following it cautiously, the group moved deeper into the woods until they reached a clearing. In the center stood an old, rusted bunker half buried in the earth. Its metal door was slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. Detective Harris approached carefully, signaling for the others to stay alert. He pushed the heavy door open, revealing a dark staircase descending into the ground. The air inside was cold and damp, carrying an eerie stillness that made everyone uneasy. Flashlights illuminated the narrow space as they descended step by step, unsure of what awaited them below. At the bottom, they found a small, cramped room lit only by a dim bulb hanging from the ceiling. Chains bolted to the wall caught their attention immediately. One set was empty, its links stretched taut, as if someone had struggled against them. But there was no sign of Sarah or Daniel. Just as despair began to creep in, one of the officers spotted a trapdoor tucked beneath a pile of blankets in the corner. With growing anticipation, they pried it open to reveal yet another hidden compartment. Inside, curled up and trembling, was Sarah. Her face was pale, her hair matted, and her wrists bore marks from the chains. But she was alive. "Sarah," Harris exclaimed, rushing to her side. "We're here to take you home." For a moment, she simply stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Then tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered hoarsely, "I didn't think anyone would find me." The teen wasted no time getting her out of the bunker and into an ambulance waiting nearby. As paramedics tended to her injuries, Harris couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and fury. Relief that they'd found her in time, and fury that someone could subject another person to such cruelty. Back at the station, Daniel finally broke under the weight of the evidence stacked against him. When confronted with photos of the bunker and news of Sarah's rescue, his composure shattered completely. "I never meant to hurt her," he cried, his voice breaking. "I just wanted her to love me back." But his excuses fell on deaf ears. Harris reminded him sternly, "Love doesn't chain people up or lock them away. What you did was sick and selfish." Daniel was formally charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and stalking. As he was led away in handcuffs, Harris felt a grim sense of satisfaction, knowing justice would be served. But his thoughts kept returning to Sarah and Emily. Their ordeal wasn't over. The road to healing would be long and painful. Still, he took comfort in the fact that they were together again, and safe. For now, that was enough. Detective Harris wasn't about to let Daniel's cryptic confession derail the investigation. Though Daniel refused to disclose Sarah's location, his earlier slip, mentioning that she was safe, gave the team hope that she might still be alive. Every clue they had gathered so far pointed to one thing. Daniel had planned this meticulously, and he wouldn't have taken her somewhere easily traceable. But no matter how clever he thought he was, Harris knew every criminal left behind a trail. Forensic experts combed through Daniel's belongings again, searching for anything overlooked during their initial sweep of his apartment. That's when they discovered something crucial, a small vial of soil tucked inside a toolbox. It seemed out of place among the other items, almost as if it had been collected deliberately. Curious, Harris sent the sample to the lab for analysis. The results came back quickly. The soil matched a specific type found only in a remote wooded area outside town. The discovery gave the team a new lead. Armed with maps and satellite images, officers began scouring the dense forest surrounding the region. It was painstaking work, navigating thick underbrush and uneven terrain. But they pressed on, driven by the possibility of finding Sarah alive. Hours turned into days, and just when fatigue started to set in, a sharp-eyed officer spotted something unusual, a faint path cutting through the trees, barely visible beneath layers of fallen leaves. Following the trail, they stumbled upon an abandoned cabin hidden deep within the woods. Its exterior was weathered and overgrown, blending seamlessly with the natural surroundings. From the outside, it looked like any other forgotten structure, but as officers approached, they noticed fresh tire tracks leading up to it. Someone had been here recently. Inside, the air was musty, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and decay. The furniture was sparse. An old table, a chair, and a mattress tossed carelessly in one corner, but there were clear signs of habitation. Empty food wrappers littered the floor, and a pile of blankets lay crumpled against the wall. Then, tucked beneath the mattress, investigators found something that made their hearts race: a journal. The journal belonged to Sarah. Each page was filled with her handwriting, shaky but determined. She wrote about her captivity, describing how Daniel had abducted her and brought her to this isolated place. "He says he loves me," she scribbled in one entry, "but I don't recognize this version of love. It's suffocating." In another, she detailed her attempts to stay strong for Emily, writing messages of hope and courage meant for her daughter. "If you're reading this, my sweet girl," one passage read, "know that Mommy loves you more than anything. Don't ever stop believing." Though the journal provided heartbreaking insight into Sarah's ordeal, it offered no direct clues about her current whereabouts. Daniel had likely moved her after realizing the cabin might be discovered. Still, the entries confirmed what the detectives already suspected. Sarah was alive, or at least had been until very recently. Back at the station, Harris confronted Daniel again, waving the journal in front of him. "We know you kept her here," he said firmly. "And we will find her. Why make this harder than it has to be?" For the first time, cracks appeared in Daniel's facade. His hands trembled as he stared at the journal, guilt flickering across his face. Yet, he remained silent, refusing to give up her location. Frustrated but undeterred, Harris doubled down on the search efforts, expanding the radius around the cabin and bringing in additional resources. As night fell over the forest, flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the trees. The officers worked tirelessly, driven by a shared determination to bring Sarah home. They didn't know how much time they had left, but they also knew one thing for certain: giving up wasn't an option. Somewhere out there, Sarah was waiting, and they weren't going to stop until they found her. Detective Harris stared at the grainy security footage again, his eyes narrowing as he replayed the clip frame by frame. The shadowy figure walking past the Thompsons' driveway 3 nights before Sarah's disappearance was blurry, but there was something about the way they moved that felt familiar. He couldn't quite place it, but instinct told him this person wasn't a random passerby. They were deliberate, almost cautious, as if trying not to draw attention. The duffel bag slung over their shoulder added another layer of suspicion. What could be inside? Clothes, tools, or worse, something connected to Sarah. Every detail mattered now, and Harris knew they were close to uncovering a crucial piece of the puzzle. Meanwhile, forensic experts worked tirelessly on the items found in the hidden compartment under the bed. The lock of hair matched Sarah's DNA, confirming beyond doubt that she had been in contact with whoever left it there. The fabric scraps were traced back to a scarf Sarah owned, while the photographs revealed subtle signs of surveillance. Some showed her leaving work or grocery shopping, moments captured without her knowledge. Whoever took these pictures wasn't just stalking her. They were planning every move carefully. As the investigation deepened, Detective Harris revisited old interviews, searching for inconsistencies or overlooked details. One name kept surfacing: Daniel Carter, a former coworker of Sarah's who had been let go from their company 6 months earlier. According to colleagues, Daniel had developed an unhealthy fixation on Sarah during his time at the office. He would linger near her desk, send her excessive emails, and even show up uninvited at social events she attended. When HR intervened, Sarah filed a formal complaint, and Daniel was fired shortly after. Harris decided to dig deeper into Daniel's background. A quick check revealed that he lived alone in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of town. His financial records showed recent cash withdrawals and purchases of supplies like rope and duct tape, items that raised red flags given the circumstances. Most stunning of all, phone records placed Daniel near the Thompsons' neighborhood on multiple occasions, including the night Sarah disappeared. With mounting evidence pointing toward Daniel, Harris obtained a warrant to search his apartment. What they found inside chilled them to the bone. The walls were plastered with photos of Sarah, some candid shots taken from afar, others stolen from her social media accounts. There were maps marked with routes to her workplace and home, along with notes detailing her daily routine. In one corner of the room, detectives discovered a collection of personal belongings. A bracelet Sarah often wore, a keychain Mark had given her years ago, and a journal filled with obsessive ramblings about how much Daniel loved her. But what caught Harris' attention most was a crumpled receipt tucked inside a drawer. It was from a hardware store and dated 2 days before Sarah vanished. Among the items listed were tools typically used for breaking and entering: a crowbar, gloves, and a flashlight. This was more than enough to bring Daniel in for questioning. When officers arrived at his apartment, Daniel initially resisted arrest, shouting angrily and accusing them of ruining his life. At the station, he remained defiant at first, denying any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. But as Harris laid out the evidence, the photos, the maps, the journal entries, Daniel's confidence began to crack. For hours, he sat silently, avoiding eye contact until finally, unable to withstand the weight of the proof against him, he confessed. "Yes, I took her," he admitted bitterly, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "I loved her, okay. She didn't understand how much I cared. I just wanted to protect her. From him. From everyone." "Where is she now?" Harris demanded, leaning forward. Daniel hesitated, his jaw tightening. "She's safe," he muttered evasively. "You'll never find her." Though frustrated, Harris knew they were closer than ever. Daniel's refusal to reveal Sarah's location only fueled their determination. Every second counted, and Harris vowed not to stop until they brought her home. The discovery under the bed sent shockwaves through the investigation, and Detective Harris wasted no time diving deeper into Sarah's life. He knew that understanding her recent behavior might hold the key to unraveling the mystery. Over the next few days, the detectives began retracing Sarah's steps in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, interviewing neighbors, friends, co-workers, and anyone else who had interacted with her. One of the first people they spoke to was Sarah's best friend, Lisa. She described how Sarah had seemed increasingly anxious in the months before she vanished. She kept saying she felt like someone was following her. Lisa recalled, her voice trembling as she sat across from the detectives at a local cafe. "At first, I thought it was just stress, work or family stuff. But then she started talking about strange things happening around the house, like doors being left open when she was sure she'd locked them, or hearing noises late at night." Lisa went on to explain that Sarah had even installed extra locks on the doors and windows, something Mark hadn't mentioned during earlier interviews. "She said she wanted to feel safe," Lisa added. "But honestly, I think she was scared, not just of some random person, but of someone specific. She wouldn't tell me who, though." The detectives also visited Sarah and Mark's neighbors, hoping to piece together a clearer picture of their daily lives. One elderly woman across the street remembered seeing a man lingering near the house late one evening. He stood by the mailbox for a long time, just staring at the house, she told them. "I thought it was odd, but I didn't want to interfere. He looked angry, somehow." Another neighbor mentioned noticing unfamiliar cars parked down the block during the nights Sarah often worked late. While none of these observations directly pointed to a suspect, they painted a troubling pattern. Someone had been watching Sarah, studying her routines, and waiting for the right moment to act. Back at the station, Detective Harris reviewed security footage from nearby homes and businesses. Most of the recordings were grainy and unhelpful, but one clip caught his attention. A shadowy figure walking past the Thompsons' driveway 3 nights before Sarah disappeared. The person wore a hoodie pulled low over their face and carried what appeared to be a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Though the image wasn't clear enough to identify the individual, the timing and location made it significant. Meanwhile, Emily continued to drop cryptic hints that both intrigued and unsettled the investigators. During another visit to the house, she approached Detective Harris and whispered, "Bad man knows Daddy leaves the window open." Startled, Harris asked her which window she meant. Without hesitation, she pointed to the one in the living room, the same one Mark admitted leaving ajar earlier in the week. It was a small detail, but it raised an important question. Had the intruder used that window to gain access to the house? As the pieces slowly came together, Detective Harris couldn't shake the feeling that they were dealing with someone close to the family. Someone who knew their habits, their vulnerabilities, and their secrets. But who? And why would this person go to such lengths to torment Sarah and leave behind clues in her own home? Every new revelation brought more questions than answers, deepening the sense of urgency. If Sarah was still alive, and everyone hoped she was, time was running out. Whoever had taken her had planned everything meticulously, leaving behind just enough evidence to keep the family and the police guessing. But as Detective Harris reminded himself, even the cleverest criminals made mistakes. Somewhere in the tangled web of clues lay the break they needed to find Sarah and bring her home. The room fell silent as Detective Harris carefully lifted the items from the hidden compartment. Each object seemed to tell a sinister story, sending waves of unease through everyone present. Mark stared at the photographs in disbelief. Pictures of Sarah taken recently, some even showing her inside their home. How was this possible? Who could have been watching her so closely without them noticing? His mind raced with questions, but answers felt painfully out of reach. Emily clung to her father's leg, her small body trembling as she watched the officers examine the evidence. "I told you, Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Monty is still here." Though her words were soft, they carried an eerie weight that lingered in the air. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that Emily's insistence wasn't just a child's imagination. It might have been rooted in something far darker. Detective Harris turned his attention back to the compartment. It was shallow, just big enough to hold the items they'd found, but its very existence raised alarming questions. Why would someone go through the trouble of hiding things under the floorboards? And why in this house, of all places? He ran his flashlight over the edges of the hollow space, searching for any additional clues. That's when he noticed faint smudges on the wood, marks that looked like fingerprints, smeared as if someone had wiped them away hastily. This wasn't random, Detective Harris muttered to his partner. Whoever did this knew the house well. They planned this carefully. Mark's stomach churned at the thought. If the intruder knew the house so intimately, it meant they weren't dealing with a stranger. Someone close to the family, someone trusted, might have been involved. The idea sent a cold shiver down his spine. He glanced at Emily, who was now sitting quietly on the bed, clutching her stuffed bunny. Her wide eyes reflected both fear and determination, as though she understood more than anyone realized. Detective Harris decided to press further. "Mr. Thompson," he said, addressing Mark, "do you recognize any of these items?" He held up one of the pieces of fabric, a torn section of what appeared to be a scarf. Mark shook his head slowly, his expression grim. "No, I don't think so. But wait." He leaned closer, squinting at the material. "That looks like something Sarah used to wear. She had a scarf like this last winter." The confirmation sent a ripple of tension through the room. Whoever had taken Sarah had left behind traces of her life, almost as if taunting those left behind. But there was something else troubling about the discovery, the timing. These items couldn't have been placed here recently. The dust around the compartment suggested it had been untouched for days, maybe even weeks. which meant the person responsible had been in the house long before Sarah disappeared. As the officers bagged the evidence, Detective Harris turned to Mark with a serious expression. "We need to ask you some tough questions," he said gently but firmly. "Do you know anyone who might have had access to your home without your knowledge? A neighbor, a friend, or even someone from work?" Mark hesitated, his mind racing through possibilities. There was no one he could think of, at least no one who would do something like this. But then again, how well did he really know the people around him? He thought about Sarah's coworkers, their neighbors, even the repairman who'd come by last month to fix the plumbing. Could any of them have been involved? While the adults discussed theories, Emily remained unusually quiet. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the spot where the compartment had been uncovered. Her lips moved silently, as though she were whispering to herself, or perhaps to someone only she could see. When Detective Harris noticed her behavior, he knelt beside her once more. "Emily," he said softly, "did Mommy ever talk to you about anyone bothering her? Anyone who scared her?" For a long moment, Emily didn't respond. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost inaudible, she said, "Bad man comes when it's dark. She said not to open the door." The room went still. Those simple words carried a chilling implication. Whoever had taken Sarah had been planning this for a while, and they might not be done yet. Within minutes of Mark's call, the quiet suburban street came alive with flashing red and blue lights. 2 police cars pulled up outside the house, their sirens cutting through the stillness of the night. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, curious about the commotion but hesitant to step outside. Mark stood at the doorway, his face pale and tense as he greeted the officers. Behind him, Emily clung to her father's leg, her wide eyes darting between the strangers and the bed in her room. The lead officer, a tall man with kind eyes named Detective Harris, introduced himself and asked Mark to explain what had happened. Mark recounted everything. Emily's insistence that her mother was under the bed, his fruitless search beneath it, and the eerie way she kept repeating phrases like, "Mommy told me not to tell anyone." As he spoke, Detective Harris listened intently, jotting notes on a small pad while another officer began examining the house. At first glance, the situation seemed far-fetched. Sarah had been missing for 3 days, and there was no logical reason to believe she could be hiding in her own home. But children sometimes say strange things when they're scared or confused, especially after traumatic events. Still, something about Emily's demeanor caught the officer's attention. She wasn't crying hysterically now. Instead, she watched them silently, almost as if she were waiting for them to discover something important. Detective Harris crouched down to Emily's level, offering her a warm smile. "Hi there, sweetheart," he said softly. "Can you show me where you saw Mommy?" Emily hesitated for a moment, then pointed toward the bed. Her tiny finger trembled slightly as she whispered, "Right there, underneath." The detective exchanged a glance with his partner before walking over to the bed. He knelt down and peered underneath, shining his flashlight into the shadows. Like Mark earlier, he found nothing unusual, just an empty space filled with dust and cobwebs. Standing back up, he turned to Emily. "I don't see anything, honey. Are you sure this is where you saw her?" Instead of answering directly, Emily tugged on Mark's sleeve and whispered urgently, "They didn't look hard enough, Daddy. Tell them to look harder." Mark relayed her words to the officers, who exchanged puzzled looks. It was clear that Emily genuinely believed her mother was nearby. This wasn't just a game or a fleeting thought. It was something deeper, something she couldn't let go of. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Detective Harris decided to take Emily seriously. "All right, let's check again," he said, motioning for his partner to join him. Together, they moved the bed away from the wall, inspecting every inch of the floor beneath it. At first, they found nothing out of the ordinary. But then, one of the officers noticed faint scuff marks on the wooden planks, scratches that looked fresh, as though someone had recently dragged something heavy across them. Curious, Detective Harris ran his fingers along the grooves. That's when he spotted it. a slight gap in the floorboards near the corner. Leaning closer, he realized the board wasn't nailed down properly. It wobbled slightly when pressed. His pulse quickened as he called for a tool to pry it open. As the officers worked, Mark held Emily close, trying to comfort her despite the knot tightening in his stomach. The air in the room felt heavier now, charged with anticipation. Whatever lay hidden beneath the floor, it was clear that Emily's instincts had led them to something significant. And as the loose panel finally came free, revealing a dark, hollow space inside, everyone froze. Inside the compartment, wrapped carefully in plastic, were items that sent chills through the room. Strands of hair, scraps of fabric, and photographs of Sarah taken recently. Someone had been watching her, and possibly much closer than anyone had imagined. The discovery left the officers speechless and confirmed one thing. This case was far more complicated and dangerous than they had anticipated. The evening was calm, with the sound of leaves rustling gently outside. Inside a small house on Maple Street, 5-year-old Emily sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, coloring in her favorite book. Her bright pink crayon slid across the page as she hummed a soft tune to herself. Downstairs, her father, Mark, lounged on the couch, flipping through channels on the TV. It had been a quiet night, just like any other, until it wasn't. Mark heard it first, a faint whimper coming from upstairs. At first, he thought it might be Emily talking in her sleep or imagining things again. She often did that when she got scared after hearing thunderstorms or watching spooky cartoons. But this time, the sound was different. It wasn't playful or innocent. It was unsettling. He muted the TV and listened closely. There it was again, a muffled cry, barely audible, but enough to send a chill down his spine. Pushing himself off the couch, Mark hurried up the stairs. His footsteps echoed softly against the wooden steps as he made his way to Emily's room. The door was slightly ajar, and he pushed it open slowly. Inside, the glow of her bedside lamp cast long shadows across the walls. Emily was sitting on the floor, clutching her stuffed bunny tightly. Her wide eyes were fixed on the bed, and tears streamed down her cheeks. "Emily, sweetie, what's wrong?" Mark asked, kneeling beside her. His voice was gentle, but worry crept into his tone. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then, in a shaky whisper, she said, "Daddy, Mommy is under the bed." Mark froze. His heart skipped a beat. Sarah, Emily's mother, had been missing for 3 days now. No one knew where she was, not even the police, who had been investigating her sudden disappearance. They'd searched everywhere, questioned everyone, but found nothing. And now, here was Emily, pointing at the bed with trembling fingers, saying something that made no sense. Trying to stay calm, Mark forced a smile. "Honey, Mommy isn't here. Remember, we're looking for her, okay? Let's check together." He reached down and lifted the edge of the bedspread, peering underneath. Nothing. Just dust bunnies and an old shoebox he'd forgotten about. "There's nothing there, sweetheart," he said, turning back to Emily. But instead of calming down, she started crying harder. "She is asterisk there, Daddy. I saw her." Now Mark felt uneasy. Was this just a child's overactive imagination, or was there something more going on? He glanced around the room, his eyes scanning every corner. Everything seemed normal. The toys neatly stacked, the curtains drawn shut, the faint smell of lavender from the diffuser Sarah always used. Yet something about the atmosphere felt off. "Emily," he said firmly, trying to hide the unease in his voice, "are you sure you saw Mommy?" She nodded vigorously, her blonde curls bouncing. "She told me not to tell anyone," she whispered, clutching her bunny even tighter. "But I miss her, Daddy. I want her to come out." That's when Mark realized this wasn't just a game or a bad dream. Something was terribly wrong. Whatever Emily thought she saw or heard under the bed, it had shaken her deeply. And if his little girl believed her mother was hiding somewhere in the house, then maybe, just maybe, he needed help figuring out why. Without wasting another second, Mark picked up his phone and dialed 911.